And now, if the engine was running, the pump would not be on. Everybody with me what I'm saying? Just like the air conditioner in your car. Now, I got it on. Come over and take a look at something over here. I need to have you look at it from probably this point of view. Okay. You see the clutch there? I mean, if this whole thing is turning, the clutch is engaged. If it's not turning, it's not. Of course, I'm not going to run the engine in there, and I couldn't if I wanted to. I don't have gas in there. And your clutch is going to stay engaged up until this tank begins to fill up with water. And when it gets almost full of water,
it automatically shuts off.
Right. Pump turns off. Yeah. This tells you that this tank needs to be empty. It's about full. Yeah. So, and here's another little thing will happen. Once you turn this off, you got to let a lot of water out before it come back on. See, I'm letting it down, letting it down, way down there, it came back on. I'm talking about the clutch. It's a. Well, I was done with that, but I was done with that. And you need to empty because, hey, I lost my pressure. I'm here cleaning away. I've been cleaning for a couple of hours, and in the back of my mind, I've been saying, well, I think this pump, this thing's going to turn off here in a minute because I think it's almost full, and all of a sudden it does. That's a good clue then that it's full. Now, the other situation is, let's say you're doing water damage. You don't even want the pump on. You don't even have the pump on to begin with. Let's say the tank was about half full. You got in your van and you say, well, I'm going down to this little old apartment that's got one room to clean, and you're driving down the highway and you go over a speed bump or something or other, the water in the tank swishes up, and you get to your next job, that little job you was going to do, and you turn on your pump and you can't get your clutch to engage. The outside pulley is spinning, but the clutch in the middle is not turning. Very likely while you were driving down there, that water swished up, the ball went up, but it won't go low enough back down because there's water in the tank, and you can't get you can't get the clutch to, and probably can't even start the engine either. So if either one happens to you, go dump your tank. More than likely what happened was that ball went up, and now we got to use a mercury switch that don't just go on and off, because if we had one that was real, the tolerance between on and off was real narrow, you'd find that when the tank is almost full, your clutch would be click, 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 on, off, click, on, off, and it just drive you silly. So we had to use a switch that you got to go way up to get it off, but you got to go way down to get it back on again. And that, well, sometimes, and those are my most favorite phone calls. Henry, I can't get my clutch to engage. I've lost my power to my clutch. How much water? It ain't full. My waste tank is not full. Go dump it. It's not full. You go dump it. He comes back and says, that's working. Or they'll set up a situation. You're in a parking lot at a motel complex, and you got to move your van from this door down to that other door. They're down at the other door now, and they start back up and they can't get the clutch to engage. The tank was almost full, and on the way down there, they put on the brakes, the water swish, and it won't come back up. Dump your waste tank. So if you're running into that situation, you need to probably just dump the tank, and you'll probably be back. I forgot to mention the thing about the clutch a minute ago. It's a very, very good clutch. They last for years and years and years. We hardly ever sell a clutch, because that tells you right away they're working really good. Okay, now that pretty well gets me through the water flow system, and I don't know. I may have left something open. Was there any questions? And I didn't give you a chance to ask questions. Did you have any questions about the water pressure system that we talked about?
Yeah. This whole system right here, is it pretty much the same for the other?
PowerMatic?
Yeah.
Very similar, yeah. Only it's number one regulator.
Because this is this runs off a tank, right? A water tank. This machine right here.
Yeah.
Oh no, it actually only has the.
It has the water in. Now you could see that's another thing that could be had. I could put a 100-gallon tank and fabricate my hose instead of out of that box, right straight from that 100-gallon tank into number 7, and carry my water with me. You could do that too. But you have the option of going either route merely by just say I just switch one hose and I can hold my breath while I change from one system to the other. If I had a 100-gallon tank, I could go back to this just by switching 2 hoses real fast. That answer your question?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing.
Very similar, except on the PowerMatic, instead of having 3 high, medium, and low, they just have one regulator. You just crank it up to what you want or down to what you want, which is great. No problem with that. But this is kind of neat. You don't have to worry about going and cranking the pressure up and down. Once you get the 3 pressure sets that you normally always clean with, they're there at each and every time you need them. So it's kind of nice to have that feature of the machine. The next one we're going to talk about is our heating system. And as a matter of fact, just so you know where it is in the book, go to your next section in the book. This is section 7, I think. I think you go to section 8. Just a few pages over. Just turn to a different page. Okay, I guess it's the next page. Yeah. And what again, like I said earlier, we're not going to sit here and read all this information. I'm going to be talking about it pretty much. And what I'm going to do, just so you can, and this is, by the way, this is not exactly this. It's not. You can use this as a wiring diagram if you were troubleshooting. Well, you can use a little bit, but if you was really going to the wiring diagram, you'd have to go into the book, and we'll do that in a little while. But I'm just going to give you this. I'm just going to give you this so that you can get an idea of how the system works. Okay, we're going to start out with this machine, and we're going to talk. First thing we're going to talk about is the alternator a little bit. A lot of people say, "Well, no, that's not all. That's a generator." Well, it does. I like it. If you like to call it a generator, that's good. But it generates alternating current, so we're both right now, okay? It generates alternating current. It has a power plug plugged into the back of it, just like any wall plug in a house. So, but that's our power plant for generating 110 volt 60 cycle power. That's exactly what it takes for this machine. It takes household power. However, we're going to generate our own electricity for this machine. We're going to generate our own 110 volt 60 cycle power. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to run our engine at about 2,900 RPM. When this engine is, and again, that's why I like for you to use your little chart that you have on the front of your solution tank. It tells you what speed to run it and all that. So if I'm running my engine at 2,900 RPM, this alternator here will be spinning at the rate that will give me regular household power. Now, if for some reason it won't generate or your belt is broken, I merely come to the back side of this thing and unplug it and use a power cord. So if I can generate my own by using just a simple power cord, I can still have 110 volt 60 cycle power to run 3 components on my heater circuit. So that's your backup system in case a belt breaks or in case the alternator should fail, is by having that.
Carry a long extension cord around.
You know, 98% of all the people have one in their vehicle anyway, because they got their vacuum sweepers, they got their other equipment that runs on 110. So most generally, you have that with you anyway. Okay, so notice at the very bottom of the page, that's where we're starting. We're starting with our alternator. We're showing a pulley on the front, well, a shaft, to show the pulley, but when that engine's running at the right speed, it will produce 60 cycle power, 110 volts. Notice, even before the switch, before the heater switch, I have a gauge, and it's on the very front panel. You have a voltage gauge on the very front panel. You'll know whether that generator or alternator is producing 110 volts even before you turn the heater switch on, because you can look at your meter on the front panel and read the AC volts. Yeah, my generator is putting out voltage, so I know I'm okay. All right, now, when we know we have voltage, then we can turn on the heater switch. By the way, that is a double pole switch. Both the negative and the positive, the black and the white leads are both broken at the same time, both reconnected at the same time, just like the illustration shows there. Now, when I turn on my heater switch, certain things will begin to happen. Notice, coming up the left-hand side of the page, we got little dots where we've twisted or tied on wires. We tie a wire onto a transformer. What kind of power are we supplying to that transformer now, guys? AC, 110, 60 cycle, household power we're applying to the thing. If we're applying 110 volts, 60 cycle power to a transformer, how much voltage, does it tell you there how much voltage that transformer puts out? 10,000. It puts out 10,000 volts. Now, if I put out 10,000 volts, what kind of meter? Large gun, heater gun. I saw it here earlier. Maybe it's on the bottom shelf. Maybe I lost. Oh, here it is. Okay, now, I assume, just pretend my fingers is this big old black transformer that sits up here. If I had 10,000 volts on my fingers and I put it down onto these contacts, you might expect to see something happen out here. If I had 10,000 volts there, you'd see an arc from tip to tip, and it is a continuous arc. It's going to sit there and it's going to put out an arc from now until you turn the heater switch off. Now, one thing all of us know, you've been to many fire schools and safety schools, to get a fire starter you need 3 ingredients. One of them is heat, and if that's a spark, that's heat. Another thing that is needed to get a fire started is oxygen. Notice if we come on up the page to the very top of the page, we hook on a motor and put a fan on there, squirrel cage fan. And notice when that fan is running, it does produce the oxygen to be blown across the tips. I still don't have a fire going yet. I'm almost there, but I don't have a fire going yet. I got to have one more thing. I got to have fuel. I got to get fuel to the, see this nozzle right, little teeny tiny hole right here? You apply to that about 105 pounds of pressure, and it causes the fuel to atomize and to throw out a fog of fuel, like about a 90-degree pattern across there. And now, when a solenoid opens up and lets the fuel come through, I've got a fire, I've got the oxygen, and now I got the fuel, and now I've got a roaring inferno coming out of that exhaust pipe. It'll burn the hair right off your arm if you stick your hand under it. We've done that many times. Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting. You said you operated this for a couple of years. You know what it'll do. I like to tell a little story that happened one time. I had a group of, I believe it was 6 guys from Western Colorado over for update training school. Only 3 of them had never had any training on the, they were brand new, and 3 of them had been there. And I was talking about some little safety things, like when you open the warm-up valve, your warm-up valve was right beside the burner thing. Anyway, I mentioned to them that there's safety feature here that you need to observe. And I said, I tell you what, and they were a bunch of young troopers, and I had a lot of fun with them. I said, I tell you what I can do. I've been with them long enough, 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Now, I said, I can look at you guys and I'll tell you which guys operates the machine, I can tell you which ones does not, just by looking at you. They says, you can't either. I said, I bet I can. I said, okay, here's what I want you, all you guys to do. I want you to roll up your both sleeves to here, stick both arms out like this. All of a sudden, 3 guys began to laugh, and 2 guys, the other 3 guys sat there. Okay. Well, what I did was, the 3 guys, they knew when you turn on the heater, if your arm is right by the exhaust, boof, and it'll swing there. I could look, I already knew which one before, I could just see the reaction. But really, the hair on your left arm was burned. Was burned off because they had done that. And we've improved it a little bit. We put a little down chute on it. Before the down chute, it's just a big old bellowing exhaust. And it would get you, especially with your left arm. Well, anyway, when that thing bellows out, you know, it comes on, it puts out a pretty good blast of heat, and if your arm is right in front of it, you won't stick around long enough to blister yourself, but you'll get out of the way. Okay. Like I said, we almost have a fire going right now, but we don't. Because there's one little circuit on this diagram we haven't even talked about. That's the middle one. If you'll notice, bolted right, it don't show it, but you got a solenoid here, and you got a fuel pump. Actually, that solenoid is bolted onto the fuel pump. I separated it so people would know that it's 2 separate components. Right now, it looks like one single component because it's bolted right onto the solenoid is bolted right onto the pump. But there's a little bolt, it's a hollow bolt that has a hole through it, and when the fuel pump is pushing fuel, it'll go through that hollow bolt and to the solenoid. The solenoid says, I'm not open yet. And up to now, that's what's happened. This thing is, we've got the fan running, we got through a shaft, we're driving the kerosene fuel pump. We have almost everything we need to get a fire started, except we're pushing fuel to the solenoid, and the solenoid says, you can't come here yet. The door's not open. You can't come through here yet. There's 2 switches, there's 2 components involved in this middle circuit that's got to be closed at the same time for the heater to come on. We've talked about one of those switches already. We've talked about the water flow switch, didn't we? Now, if water is flowing, that switch will close and you'll get a green light on the front panel of your machine. On the very front panel, there's a green and a red light on the front panel. And you'll notice you got a red one, you got a green one. If everything is running and I have water flowing, that green light will come on and say, I got one switch closed. Now, there's one other requirement. What is the other requirement to get power on through to the solenoid? What's that other switch? Temperature control. You know, we turned this heater switch on a long time ago. We already done that a long time ago. But now, we get through the water flow switch, we turn on the green light, but there's still one other switch that's got to be closed. You get the red light on, and when that happens, you got power coming all the way, power all the way over to the solenoid. The solenoid snaps open, and I got my fire. I got fuel into the fire. So that tells you right away what happens if you turn loose of the wand. Heater goes off. If you trigger the wand, it'll come back on, off, up until such time as the temperature control says, oh, I'm already up to 220 degrees. I'm going to turn off. You can still get your green light coming on and off, but you still won't get your solenoid light on because now the temperature control says, I don't want any more heat. I got enough already. So that's the basics of this whole heater circuits, is this simple little diagram here. It's a little more complex than this indicates, but this is exactly what we need to know about our heater circuits to get them to come on. With any kind of luck, I can show you part of it, assuming that everything works I hadn't ran it in a little while. But let's see what happens. I just happen to have a part of a Wayne burner here. I have the transformer. And if I open the transformer, you can actually see where the gun goes in there. So there's your two big springy contacts. And I got my two big springy contacts, and the gun is sitting there in a specific place. And when I let this transformer down onto the gun, then I should have that. Now let me grab something. I haven't done this in a few weeks, so I assume everything is still working. I don't have a heater switch and all those good stuff. I do have a power cord, and I plug it in. So you'll feel some air coming out your way if the fan is running. And you should see the spark that I was talking about. Now, when I get a green and red light, I put voltage to this solenoid, and the solenoid opens and lets me shoot fuel into the gun. So you see this little device right here is the all-important part of the burner system. Let me grab one more item. Now we're talking about a little bit of troubleshooting. If you wanted to check this transformer, usually you could raise it up right here and you just see the fire. I don't know, probably you can see the fire jumping off the contacts. Well, that'd be a pretty good clue. That'd be a pretty good clue that the transformer's working good. But let's just say you couldn't see that and it's dark in the van. If it's dark, it even get better, really. I have had some guys do it in the dark. I ain't really see it then, but I've had guys say, well, I can't tell whether the transformer's working or not. So I said, got a screwdriver? Yeah. Plastic handle? Yeah. Better be. And then you can raise it up and you can do a little test like so. Okay. So it wouldn't be very difficult to test a transformer to see if it's producing a spark. That simple. Just as simple. Now, these components are relatively easy to get to. They're back on the back left-hand corner of the machine. This burner sits right on there, and it shoots the flame right into those heater coils, and it does put out a big bellowing flame. We used to have a different building, and we had a septic tank, and it seemed like always in January, the septic tank would have to be emptied. The ground was frozen. We'd take one of these and stand on a chair and shoot it right at the ground and thaw up the dirt so we could dig out the septic tank with one of these heater coils, Wayne burners. Again, this is your fuel pump, and this is the solenoid, and it's held on by that hollow bolt that I'm turning with my finger. That's what I was talking about, and showing you the picture of down here. It's 7/16 of an inch long or whatever. Okay. Let me get rid of this. Now the temperature control, normally, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm turning one switch on and off now. I'm turning the switch on, turn it off. So you could actually hear the switch click in there, but you know, whether it's calibrated or whether it's right on where it should be, you'll never know till you test it and start finding out at what temperature does it turn off and all that. It should turn off very near the temperature you have set in. If you set in 200 degrees or whatever, it should turn off at, you should hear it turn off at about 200 degrees. Now, one of the things about the the way this system is designed, let's say I put in 200 degrees and the heat's coming up. When the heat comes up to 200, you should hear it shut off, but it will override a few degrees and then start back down. You'll hear the burner come back on again, and then it goes underneath and then back up. You'll see it go above and below the set-off point. That is a natural phenomenon of this machine. It'll work that way. Now, if it's an enormous underride or override, this might tell us we might have a problem of some sort that might need to be looked at. I forgot to show you a couple of things on this while I had it up there. Things that you shouldn't have to do for years and years and years, but so you'll know about it. I can control a lot of things on this heater. I can control how much air is being pulled into it by adjusting these air bands on the side. That's way too much. Usually about three quarters of an inch or so is about what you need. Now those don't go no place. Only, see, these do. They go all the way in. And there's, whatever you have at this interval, you'll have another interval at about 3 or 4 different intervals around the circumference of the bands. But this will affect how the burner runs, how it heats, how it smokes, how it don't smoke, by adjusting this. There's another adjustment that we have you be very cautious about doing, and get where and see it. Notice inside this nut here, there's a screwdriver adjustment. That's your fuel pressure adjustment. Now, you got to be very cautious about playing with that because there's no gauge. You could put a gauge on it if you wanted to, install a gauge so you could set your pressures to exactly something. They're preset for about 105 pounds of pressure as you get the machine. It shouldn't change at all. Don't expect that this will change at all through many, many years, but down the road somewhere, maintenance and service will be done. Each quarter turn increment on this thing, clockwise will increase the fuel pressure from 3 to 4 pounds. Counterclockwise will decrease your fuel pressure from 3 to 4 pounds. So if you're jockeying around with it trying to get more heat or save fuel or whatever the situation may be, always keep up with what you've done so you can always go back to square one should you get out of the ballpark someplace. And if all else fails, you got a gauge port up here. Put a tube in a little $10 gauge and set your pressure for about 105 pounds of pressure, and you can always look at it. Some people have installed those on their equipment, which is great. No qualms at all about that. Highly recommended. And the other situation you could get into with this, if this fuel pump gets water. Water is the biggest enemy to kerosene fuel pumps there is. If you collect water in your kerosene tank, 2 or 3 drops a week, until a year later you got a pint floating around in the bottom, water gets up in the pump, it'll lock up your pump. This motor can't turn, it tries to turn, and in doing so it'll pop the circuit breaker on the end. It's like dropping that T-bone into your garbage disposal accidentally and locks it up. You have to get the T-bone out and then pop the circuit breaker and you're back in business again. In this case, what you probably would do, you would open this transformer, power off, you reach in and with your pinkies, don't put a screwdriver in there, but these pinkies rotate the fan until you break it loose. You got more power than this little 1/8 horsepower motor, 1/4 horsepower motor. Okay? So normally you can break it loose just by turning that fan. Fan looks something like this until somebody there's a hollow bolt that I'm talking about that holds it on. But see, somebody has played a little game with that, and it turned it at 3,450 RPM. If I stuck this on here, guess what would happen? It would shake itself. It'd be worse than your tire on your car that's way out of balance. It'll shake the burner system apart. So try not to bend the blade. That's the reason they do it with your pinkies if you need to. Now, if you have to do that, very likely in the bottom of your kerosene tank, you may have some water floating around in the bottom. If you look in there with a flashlight, don't light your lighter. If you look in it with a flashlight, you see a bubble floating around in the bottom of the tank. That's water. So you would need to empty that. And again, these are things that don't happen right away. The things I'm talking about are little tidbits or little things that happens over a long period of time, collecting that couple of drops of water a week or whatever, or 2 or 3 drops a week or whatever. But anyway, up to now, the things I've talked about on the burner system, that prompt any questions that you can think of? We'll look at some things on the machine here in just a minute, just to make sure we know where everything is and we can get to all these items and all that. Got one more switch I want to show you. Our control. It's a control, not a switch. Now I got 2 more. Sorry. First one will be the water flow switch. Remember I had you guys looking over the top, trying to find this thing over here a little while ago. The reason I didn't push it too hard because I knew I was going to have one in my hand so I could show it to you in more detail. The way this water flow switch works, there's a float and a magnet inside of it. And the way it works, when water flows in and out, it causes that float and the magnet to raise up. It causes it to float. The magnitude of water going through it causes it to float. And to see how what it's all about, there's a spring, and there's your float and the magnet. The magnet is the little thing on the very top here. Okay, so when you put it back together, the little screwdriver thing goes in the bottom, just like so. Then you drop your spring in here, like so, and then you screw it down. If it's acting a little lazy or something other, like, oh, I can get it to come on with the warm-up, but I can't get it to come on with the tool, very likely the spring is getting calcium and minerals on it. You can cut out 2 or 3 loops, or I've had guys take the spring out completely. Just pull the spring out. It'll float up, it'll drop down, it'll float up, and it'll still work even in. Now, the spring is replaceable, the float is replaceable, and the reed switch is replaceable. This is the switch itself right here. If I take this switch and I pull the bronze envelope or cover off to see what was in it, I would find a glass envelope. Look at it very closely, you'll find 2 reeds in there. They look like they're touching each other, but they shouldn't be. They should be almost touching each other. So when the magnet comes up adjacent to those 2 reeds, it magnetically snaps those 2 reeds together, and I have continuity through the circuit. It's kind of amazing to think that those 2 reeds are that close together, but not touching. But anyway, as this thing, like I can do it with, I can shake it here, and as that magnet comes up adjacent to these reeds, it snaps them on. Okay, let me put it back together. Oops, wrong end. And there's it, complete. And then you have the insides there. Okay, so you know, that switch is replaceable. I think I'm going to guess $70, $60 or $70, somewhere in that range to replace the whole switch. But you can replace the float and the magnet. You can replace the spring or the whole reed. I don't push the reed switch too much because it comes high enough that it's almost, well, I want to just replace the whole thing instead of trying to save $10 a bag or whatever. But it's a little costly to do it that way. But it's available, and just to let you know that those items are available. Okay, now that's one of the, you know, in this circuit we talk about right here, we talk about this switch. Now I'm going to talk about the other switch. I'm talking about the temperature control. The way a temperature control works. Now, I know some of you, when you were down on your hands and knees and looking underneath that machine, you saw this wire going in there. It looked like a wire. It's not a wire, it's a hollow tube. I've had guys take it out and cut it in two and then try to sort it back together. Nah, it won't work. You let the air out of your tire when you cut it in two. This tube is filled with a gaseous substance, and as I heat it, this gas expands. And then as the gas expands, it goes into a little thing here. See this little round, I say like a frog sitting there, and as it gets hotter and hotter, he swells up more and more. Kind of see what this little thing I'm touching right here. And doing so, it will do what I'm trying to do with my fingers. As soon as I find it. See, it swells up, turns the switch off. Okay, see the little round bronze plate? Yeah. As it swells up, it kicks the switch off. As it cools down, it kicks the switch back on. So this circuit is really, it's more mechanical than it is electrical, really. Only electrical part is the switch is closed, the switch is open, the switch is closed, the switch is open, just like we saw on our diagram there. So, and by the way, we have recalibrated those, and they can be recalibrated by taking the knob off, and up through the little hollow shaft, you put an Allen wrench in there, and they can be recalibrated. If you got a heater overrun or something other, and it threw the thing out of calibration, you come back and recalibrate it. So it's a very good switch. So don't let this thing jingle against something like that. After a while, wear a hole in the thing, and out goes the gas. And once the gas is gone, it wouldn't turn off for nothing, because there's nothing to push that, to kick that switch off. So there's your two switches that we was talking about on your little diagram: water flow switch, your temperature control, and we're showing how the transformer works and the basic ideas of the thing. I'm going to turn the machine around. I think you can see about everything we need to see from where you're sitting. I'm going to undo that battery. No, it's okay. I don't have it on. If the charger was on. Anyway, here's your burner, and your reset button is on the side, probably. Oh, yeah, here it is. Some of them are on the end, some of them are on the side, because one manufacturer may have one place, another manufacturer's motor may have it another. So if you don't find the little red button on the end like the one we looked at over there, it's on the side, in case you're locked up. And again, I can raise my transformer up and down like I was talking about there. It's on a hinge, it raises up and down. Now another thing that happens, you got a 6-gallon, I think it's 6 or 5-gallon fuel tank that your kerosene is in. By the way, kerosene is your better heating fuel. There's situations people get into where they can't get kerosene, and they have to use diesel. Diesel works, but it's smokier and stinkier, but they're cleaning it up somewhat. It's getting better as time goes on.
Is it more expensive than the kerosene?
This what?
Is the diesel more expensive than kerosene?
About the same, I would guess.
They're about comparable right now. You're looking real close to about $4 a gallon,
$4 a gallon
for either one of them.
I know we got a gas station right down the street here, Pilot, and they have a pump out way at the corner of the building where you can buy kerosene. Really? And it's running about the same as diesel. Probably might be a little cheaper, I don't know. But it would work better. But if you can't, sometimes when you go to diesel, you might have to change your air bands a little bit. You know, open and close the air bands a little bit to kind of knock the smoky part down. As I was about to say, you have a kerosene tank. You have a hose from the kerosene tank to the machine, to the kerosene input, and it's like a boat tank. It has a little squeeze ball on it, and of course, the first time you fire this up, or if you run out of kerosene, what you need to do is to hook your hose onto your kerosene tank, and before you hook it onto your machine, it has a male QD, and you push down on the hose on the concrete or something and squeeze the squeeze ball until you get all the air out of the system. And most generally, it'll work. It'll come right on and start working right away. If you'll pump it a couple of times after the burner starts to get that nice little bubble of air out of the system. So another way to get it out, and the best method to get it all out, see a little hose hanging out the side of the machine down there by the battery? If you put a cup at the end of that and open with the heater switch on and open that, it'll bleed the air right out of the system. So if squeezing it out, don't get it done, you can always go to this, or you might go to this first. I don't know, this is pretty easy. Unless you build something into your van or into your trailer that's got all this blocked and you can't get to it. But I'd highly recommend, whatever you do, is when you build shelves or anything in there, keep this area open, because this is an area, there's maintenance and service that might have to be done on that burner. If you got to move all your equipment out of the van to get to it.
The one says kerosene, the other one's gasoline.
Gasoline, And in both cases, you have the squeeze ball and the line. One has a male QD on the end of it for kerosene. The other has a female in, and that's so you don't get them mixed up. Now, there's still a way to get them mixed up. If you undo the other ends at the tank and you come back, and I can assure you this engine will not run on kerosene. It'll try, it'll smoke and rattle and chatter a few times and quit. And yes, your burner will run on gasoline for a couple of minutes until the gasoline is so dry, it dries the pump out. Now you're in there squeezing, you're bleeding and all that, and you're getting gasoline all over the place, and that's where you can get a fire started. I've ran into that situation a few times out of the 30-something years I've worked here, where people have got them mixed up. It's kind of easy on the engine part. If I get kerosene in there, I'll normally take the carburetor air cleaner off, and I'll pour just a little bit of gasoline in there and fire it off, and it'll smoke and chatter and rattle. I do it again, about 2-3 times, just a little gasoline into the carburetor, like we do in our cars occasionally. Boom, away she goes, and then by now you got your lines cleared and you're back to square one. Gasoline in the burner, I'd just say, be cautious about bleeding it out, but try to get it all bled out if you do get them. If we're all human like the rest of us and do get them crossed up, it don't happen very often, but it can. It certainly could happen. Can you think of questions to ask about the burner system, the heating system? Let me give you a little Henry theory. Did you hear that? Henry theory? A lot of people want to crank their temperature control way up there to 300 degrees or whatever like that. And say, man, I want all the heat I can get. I don't know that live steam cleans that well because it dissipates so fast. The example I've given many times is, if I held my hand up here and you shot at my hand with live steam, I'm not even going to feel it very much. I doubt if I'd even feel it. I might feel warm. But if I shoot at my hand with a gun with 210-degree water, I'll lose all the skin on my hand. I think that's pretty good cleaning. As long as you get up in and around near the boiling point, 212 sea level, you should have very good cleaning. This going right up to oblivion and trying to get piles, and it just sounds impressive. Get that old wand out there and thing is popping and snapping and going on. All your competitors down the street with their little other machines that don't have the capability of it, yeah, you can make them look kind of bad because you're showing these people, I can get it. And the fringes of live steam is good, and it sounds impressive, and it does great, but just going way on up there, to me, I don't know whether the people up front would agree with me 100%. I think they will. So, watch your temperature and don't try to go to oblivion on that. Now, when you have to get into your manual and do some real troubleshooting, we got a section in there I'm going to have you turn to, and I'm going to show you how you do some. After you read through and kind of done your thing on your burner. There's again looking at that block down at the bottom you guys couldn't see very good a little while ago. But now what I want to get you into another section in the book. Yeah, go to page 33. Near the top of page 33, all the electrical diagrams, and there's about 7 of them in there, and then you can find the nomenclature of the one you want to look at. So let's just pull out an easy one here. Let me borrow your book just for a second here. Let's just say we want to look at oh, that's the extraction system. I'm sorry, I got you in the wrong one. I didn't get you where I wanted to get you yet. Back in the back part. Told you I couldn't see electrical system down on page 39 is really where I want. I'm sorry, 39 is where I wanted to go. So notice these paragraph numbers. I can correlate the item I'm talking about to the paragraph number. So I can get in here and I can read about whichever one I want to read about. Oh, comes here. So I don't know. You could just pick out any one that would turn you on. So see if you can get to pick this one of these out and see if you can find the paragraph number that corresponds to that. Now, once you find the paragraph, as you read it, then it's going to refer you to an electrical diagram for that particular. So you would want to use that electrical diagram as you read that one little short paragraph to take you through it. You see what I'm saying? So if you want to, whatever one you're reading, look at your electrical diagram that they refer you to. And I don't care which one you're looking at. Should be a electrical diagram for whatever. No, it'd be in the same section with. No, you stay in this one.
No, actually, this is one I picked.
Okay. Okay. Let's. You're in the. It's getting it wrong. It should be one of these. What was 11? What?
12.
Oh, 12 one?
Yeah, I ended up picking the maintenance.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
But yeah, I see what you're
Yeah, like I said, if you're reading about there's your. That's the simplest. Oh, by the way, that's the simplest diagram there is on the whole machine. You know why? You take this tachometer here. You take the wire off and you wrap it around the spark plug lead, and that's all there is to it. You don't have nothing, no electrical hookup at all. You just take that
the red part and
just twist it around the spark plug lead, and it feels the magnetic energy around that plug every time it fires, and it makes the. So that's a. But all your electrical heater circuit diagrams and all that are in this area that I'm talking about right now. Is in this section in the book. For any electrical diagram that you might be looking. Did I confuse everybody completely with that, or everybody see what I'm trying to get at? That's the reason I say I'm not going to read this book, and I'm going to have you sit here and read it now, because that just drives you completely crazy. I mean, I'm driving a little bit crazy already, but if you sit there and read all that, you'd run me out of the room, I'm pretty sure. Okay, let's go back to, so we're still talking about the burner. You know, there's all kinds of diagrams and stuff on the burner, and look at page 31, as a matter of fact. Look at page 31 in your book. Back up a little bit. Again, I'm talking about things that you might have to do well down the road. If you had to set up your burner you've got it all torn apart. You're in there. You're going to set up the gun. You're going to set up the gun to some specific. The tips have got to be so far apart, and all this is. It tells you exactly how to set up this gun to run this system, make it work just the way it should work. But again, these are things that. How often do people have to do it? If you do it before 5 years from now, it'd surprise the heck out of me. Okay. What time we got here? Let's take a. I'm getting ready to hit another area. That last area. You know, we talked about all the way down through heating. Now, the last one I'm talking about is recovery. And before getting into recovery, let's take a little break, walk around, and stretch your legs. 35 is the next page I'd like for you to take a look at. Has to do with the recovery system, and the diagram is pretty completed. It's a pretty good way to look at the good way to look at your vacuum system, how it works. Of course, the heart of the vacuum system is the vacuum blower itself. Vacuum blower being this big component sitting right here on big gray component. It has inside of it 2 impellers, and if you'll notice, the vacuum blower is coupled directly to the engine. Whatever speed the engine is running, so is the vacuum blower. And we already said if you follow your instructions on the front panel, it'll indicate you should run about 2,900 RPM. So therefore, the blower is running about 2,900 RPM. And sometimes people wonder how much vacuum they're pulling and all that. And the only way you can come up with that, and I'll give you a sheet there, and is a chart, and you base it on what speed you're running it at, how many inches of mercury you're pulling on, and then it'll tell you what the CFM is. But anyway, as you were in the process of buying the machine, I'm sure that was one of the questions. You said, what kind of vacuum, how many inches of mercury does it pull, what's the CFM and all that good stuff.
What does CFM stand for?
Cubic feet of air per minute.
Okay.
And inches of mercury is the lifting power, and it's measured in inches of mercury. Or sometimes water lift. And both are good terms, but they're not, 5 inches of water lift is not equivalent to 5 inches of mercury. It's altogether different. So anyway,
What's just a more practical application for like layman?
I think more people go by inches of mercury than do water lift. Some of our competitors goes water lift, and there's probably a reason for that. And nothing wrong with it, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with using inches of water lift, but inches of water lift is a bigger number to equivalent to the same thing as inches of mercury. So some people might be impressed by saying, well, his machine has X number of inches of water lift, but your machine only has this many inches of mercury. Could be exactly the same, you know.
Right.
Some might
Mercury's
say,
heavier than what?
yeah, some might say, well, I have 200 pennies. The next guy might say, well, he's only got $2. You know, but they're saying the same thing, only in different terms. So anyway, again, that's more or less sales data that I'm talking about now, but it's all based on something, and it's the speed the blower is turning and how many inches of mercury and how much air is flowing through the tubes and the pipes and all that to come up with. So when we stop and we think about the vacuum blower, and I'm going to have you in a few minutes to really look at one that's torn down and pulled apart. You'll see on the end of that cart back there. Always an older model, but and a little smaller blower than the one we have, but you sure get some good ideas about how it works. As a matter of fact, that might be a good thing to do right now. We might want to look at walk over and look at the vacuum blower before we actually get into this. Let's do that. Let's go over and look at this vacuum blower. So you might kind of focus over here onto this blower. Now keep in mind, this is an older blower and made by a different company, but they work all, so far as the basic principles, they work exactly the same way. Your tail blower that you have on your machine does pull up considerably more air than this one did. But inside this thing, you have impellers. Now, of course, the wall is removed. Like the cylinder wall is removed so you can see what the pistons are doing, or in this case, impellers.
Can you define impeller for me?
It impels air. It's
like
one of these things right here. As they spin, and as they rub the walls of the outer walls, here's the way I look at an impeller. Let's say that you're just going to kill a fly with a 4x8 sheet of plywood. And you say, how could I possibly miss? But then, on the other hand, the fly is going to watch you and walk away because you're trying to hit him, and you know why you didn't hit him with a 4x8 sheet of plywood?
Because of the air pressure.
Exactly, you're moving too much air.
Right.
You might look at these impellers as being that 4x8 sheet of plywood. Keep in mind, there's a big hole at the top and a big hole at the bottom. Now, as this thing spins around, it's going to suck air in at the top, and it's going to get caught between. It's going to get caught between the lobes. As soon as I can turn it around, it's going to get caught between the lobes, like maybe this pocket of air here. Now, as it turns on around, it's going to squeeze the air out and down into the bottom. They call these positive displacement blowers, meaning they pull in the air and then it pushes it out at the bottom. It don't just flow out or fly out. It's pushed out. It's sucked in and pushed out. Now, the thing you need to know about these, and that's the reason I kind of threw that chart at you a minute ago. Somebody, well, how much air is going to go through there? Well, I can't tell you until I look at my chart over there, you know, exactly. But anyway, things you need to know about this. On this side of the blower, there's a cover over this, and it's like a gear housing, and there's oil. These gears run in a little oil up to this point where this pencil is. So I found the hole there. So there's about this much oil in the blower. The bottom part of the gears runs on that oil. That lubricates not only the gears, but it also lubricates the bearings in that end of the blower. So you definitely want to keep the crankcase filled with sufficient amount of oil at all times.
Is there a special oil for that?
Yes, we use it. Well, it's kind of interesting. When we had Roots blowers, Roots says, we want you to use our oil. When we had Tuddill blowers, they said, we want you to use Tuddill oil. And now, is one oil better than the other? I don't know, but while these suckers are under warranty, I like for you to use what they recommend, because if something happens, they can't come along later and say, oh, you used the wrong oil in the thing. So I'm always feel good when I use the product that the company recommends.
Is this supposed to be directly aligned, or is it off like that for a reason?
It is probably directly aligned, probably. Again, this is one that pulled out of the trash.
Okay.
This is trying to get some out. And there's timing on this, there's timing marks, and all these things are timed to the nth degree, so everything is happening at the right time. Now that's taking care of this end of the blower, keeping a certain amount of Tuddill blower oil in this thing, like the differential of your automobile or the transmission on your manual shift automobiles, a certain level of oil. On this side, there's two grease zerks, and we need to grease these bearings periodically. And remember, we've been looking at a maintenance. We've seen that we haven't looked at the chart yet. Maintenance checklist. Our maintenance checklist will tell you how often you ought to lubricate those, and so that's taking care of both ends of the blower. Now is the grease zerks and the oil in the crank. Now there's another area. All of you probably ran into something called a blowover. This is when this waste tank fills completely full of dirty water and something didn't turn off, or we had a lot of foam and soap suds and foam building up, had grit and stuff in it that's being blown right through the blower and out the exhaust. Well, if you get grit in the blower, if you look at these impeller look at those little grit marks on there. It'd be like saying, let's take handful of grit and put it on the top of your piston on your automobile, what would it do to the sidewalls of your, well, I mean,
Scarred up.
I'm not really, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not too much. Because you don't put grit on, not intentionally, sometimes we don't change our filters and cleaner, we get grit in, and that's what wears engines out. But anyway, that's what wears blowers out. These blowers, as they begin to wear, this is like the rings on the car. It still runs, but it's low compression, not much power, it blows smoke out the exhaust. And it still gets you around, but it's not drying the carpet like it should. So we want to find out how to wash these out. We do recommend, if you have a blower, or at the end of the day, shooting a little clean water through the blower, let it air dry for about, a minute or two, and then shoot some WD-40. We put a special place on your machine so you can do this procedure without doing anything drastic.
Really?
We put that on the machine. We have a blower oiler, washer outer port on the blower, or on the machine, so you can do this. So if we keep the inside clean and the bearings and the gears clean, we ought to keep this blower for many, many years. Now, again, just to get your attention a little bit, a new blower is going to go over $2,000. So it behooves you to take good care of your blower so you don't have to spend that $2,000. And I don't think you're going to in the next, we got machines out there that's 25, 30 years old, still running the same blowers, but they've taken good care of them through the years. So maintenance on your blower is very important. See, now we can look at, some blowers have impellers like this, but back in the earlier days when we had portables and everybody thought they had the best machine in the whole world going, they had impellers like this, and they thought they were professional carpet cleaners. So you can go the BB gun or the 22 rifle, or you can go the Alt-6 if you want to go bigger, and that's what our bigger machines do. They have the capability to dry better, and if you dry better, you're cleaning better, because if you're sucking the water out, you're definitely sucking the dirt out. So you got to be able. And that is a finger pincher. If you're not real careful, I've had a couple guys get a blood blister there, so be careful. But anyway, when I talk about the vacuum blower, the big gray animal over there on that machine, this is kind of what it would look like if I had it torn apart and pulled out on the shelf like this. So we can go back now and have a seat, and we'll talk about it some more. Oh, thank you. Okay. Now, when we start talking about this blower, as it spins, it's trying to pull in some air from the very top of the blower. Remember I said it has a big hole at the top? So we began to wonder, well, where in the world did this blower get his air from? Well, if I had a lid on this, it'd say, well, anyway, whether I do or not, it gets it from this tank, of course, through the screen, and it sucks air out of this tank. Everybody with me on that? Now, if I have a lid on here and it's sealed good, and it will be when you pull it down and you start your vacuum, it's going to yank that lid down against that. And now hey, I look around, there's only one hole left in that whole tank. There's only one hole in that whole tank. And the way you'd find it is you'll find this elbow at the top. So there's the only hole, and the tank comes down and it comes out. And really, when it's all said and done, when the story's all told and you get to the very end of the vacuum route, the only place that the thing can get any air from is through this little slot at the top of the cleaning tool. And you're pulling many cubic feet of air per minute is being pulled out of that. So when I put this tool down onto the carpet, assuming my vacuum hose is connected to the machine and the lid is on good and the dump valve is closed, there's only one hole in that tank, it goes to here. So as you operate this tool, it's going to suck that dirt and that debris right out of your carpet. It's going to dry your carpet quite well. Now, there's funny little thing happens, and you guys know this better than I do. Your prospective customer normally has two major questions they're going to ask you. Naturally, the first question that they're going to ask you has something to do with what's in my wallet. How much is it going to cost me? And inevitably, the next question they're going to ask you is, how long does it take to drive? Oh, look at that. He took it right, took those words right out of my mouth. I hadn't said them yet. They're very interested in that drying thing. That's why we got to spend the time. If we have to make the extra drying stroke, if we have, what have we got to do? We got to make the customer happy, because they want back in the living room in about an hour and a half, but we know it's going to be longer than that. How long is it going to be? Well, it depends on a lot of things. Humidity, temperature, air movement, and how well of a job you did drying the carpet as you cleaned it. So you want to get back in the house as quickly as you can. And like I've told people over and over and over, if you don't dry the carpet, you probably haven't cleaned it either, because if you didn't suck the water out, you didn't suck out very much of the grit and the grime and the debris that you shook loose with agitation and emulsification that we talked about earlier. But anyway, we kind of see then how that blower is working, and we look at it and we say, it goes, the only way to get any air into that thing, if the lid is on the waste tank and the dump valve is closed, we've got our dump valve down here closed. If you leave it open, you're going to suck air through the dump valve, and down goes your vacuum. So anytime you start your machine, you ain't got any vacuum, you want to go back, start at the tool and walk yourself all the way back to the machine, making sure your hoses are connected properly and they're hooked on the machine, or make sure your lid is firmly on the top of the tank and you haven't left your dump valve open. Almost for sure, if you didn't have good vacuum or you lost almost one of those things is going to be left open. You're going to find that by walking back to the machine. Okay. Now there's a situation where we got to watch the load, how much of the vacuum pull that we're really inserting onto the carpet. Let's just play a silly little game. Let's say the vacuum blower was 100% efficient, no slippage, no air loss, or nothing. Let's say that your hoses were made out of cast iron instead of flexible hoses like your vacuum hoses are, and your tank was made out of stainless steel 1 inch thick. If you put your tool on the carpet, it ought to pull the carpet right off the tacks, or if you put your hand in front of that vacuum, it ought to suck you right into the machine and chop you up in little bitty pieces and spit you out the other side. Exaggerating a whole bunch here, but you get the idea of what's happening. So somewhere along the way, we got to have a relief. We got to have a point where we can't allow this thing to pull any harder. Otherwise, this 25 horsepower engine is going to fade out from under you. You don't have the power to pull the tool across the carpet. Your knuckles are dragging the ground pretty soon because it's trying to adhere to the carpet so tight. So we need a vacuum relief. That's what this little spring-loaded device is right here. We have this thing set so it'll break at a specific point. We like to set them to break at about 12 to 13 inches of mercury. Anything greater than 12 or 13 inches of mercury turns out to be just a waste of energy, really. If 13 inches of mercury won't pull it out of the carpet, it ain't coming out anyway. So we set this thing so that it takes about 13 inches, and you can, after a while, when you get over it, just push on that and see it. Boy, it takes that much air to push that thing open. So that's a lot of vacuum. So anyway, this is called a vacuum relief breaker, and that's how we control how much pull the engine has, how much. One little example that happened one time, we had a few years ago, we had a customer, one of our customers, operator, that said, you know, Henry, says, it seems that they keep calling me back to the carpet's not drying quickly, and I'm still working on it real hard, and I keep having to go back to redo the carpet. And I said, well, maybe your vacuum blower or something was wrong. We checked his machine all out. He didn't have any leaks that we could find. His hoses were good. And it just turned out his vacuum blower had flat worn out. It just didn't have the pull. So he bit the bullet, and he did the only thing to do in a case like that. He bought a new blower and put on. You know what? That guy was back the next day complaining. And guess what it was? He said, this machine is working me to death. He said, man, I have to work on that. And we had it set to break it, you know, at a good point. But he had lost his vacuum so much, he could scoot that thing across the carpet, and it wasn't adhering, it wasn't drying. Well, he was really complaining. Now you got to work for a living, fella. Now you're drying carpet, and you got to work for it. So, yeah. Now, a lot of my operators that's new. Now you've been there, done that. A couple of years of working there. You know exactly what to expect. But I've had brand new operators that it'll make you sore. It'll make your muscles and your legs and your arms sore in the very beginning because you're working out a brand new set of muscles that you hadn't worked out in a long time. And I had one University of Nebraska football player that bought a machine, and he complained. He said, "Man, they had to kill me. I'm so sore I can't hardly walk." Well, that only lasted a few days because he developed the muscles and all that to take care of it. But you got to work, and you will develop techniques that will make it easier, and you're learning how to glide the tool much more easier as you go along. I'm pretty bad at it myself. I think I know how, but when I go out and do a house or my house, I feel it because I don't do it every day. Okay, now we get down pretty good. We got good air, assuming the hoses are good. By the way, on your vacuum hoses, a little rule of thumb to go by is we give you a vacuum reducer that goes from 2.5 to 2 inch. That's a machine reducer. That's a basic part of your machine. So starting from here, you start with 2-inch hose, and you go out. And I would like for you to don't use any more than 1.5 inches. And you have to use 1.5 inches because guess what? Your tool is 1.5 inches. But only when you have to, only use your extra 1.5 inches in a desperate situation where I can't get there no other way than use it. Because as you begin to reduce the size of your hoses, longer and longer strands, then you will reduce your airflow somewhat. It'll still be pretty darn good vacuum, but keeping your hose as big as you can, as far out as you can, you'll find that you'll have a better vacuum situation, and you'll do better drying and better cleaning. So kind of reduce the amount of vac hose, that 1.5 inches that you use. So we got good hoses, good tool, nothing's plugged up, everything is working really great. But there's still one more thing that's very important. This is the most abused thing on this whole machine through the whole 30-something years I've dealt with this, and that's this filter inside the tank. If you plug that filter up, it's like me. I can plug up some of my holes, and I can still get along pretty good. But as I plug up more and more of them, and finally shut up the last one, I'm dead. Well, it's not too much different with this thing. As you begin to plug that up, and this filter begins to get dirty, you're working harder, and you're making extra strokes, you're spending extra time, you're burning up a lot more gasoline because it's working hard. And so keeping that filter clean is very important. Now, it's got a hose clamp. I can loosen the hose clamp. I can rotate the filter through 360. You can use a wire brush. Don't use one too aggressive and tear up your filter, but rotate it through 360, wash it, clean it. Or if you want to take it off and clean it, it's very important to do that. Now, a while back we had a different filter. We had a 2.5 inch filter that we used for years and years and years until we come to this bigger. This big one doesn't. It's better, and it'll take longer to plug it up, but you still got the same thing. If it plugs up, you still got to a serious problem. You're not cleaning carpet very good anymore. But I'll show you some older filters, and they still use it on some of our equipment. A couple of them. And then when you get a better look at it, something like this. But some of the older filters that we use, and I like to show these because it shows just what people can get into. We used to have a filter that fit right on there like that. This guy came in and again he was complaining that he was leaving the carpets wet. After looking at the machine for about 45 seconds, I found this problem. I said, well, your filter's, it's gone. He said, well, I cleaned it before I brought it in, Henry.
Yeah.
You think he did? I don't think he did. But we've had guys that call themselves professional carpet cleaners that had situations like this. And I can tell you right away, he's not a professional carpet cleaner. He's not even a carpet cleaner. He's a carpet wetter. So you got to keep it clean. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a lot more money, more gasoline, more time on the job, and produce a lot.
How long does it take to replace those filters? Like 5 minutes?
Just one clamp, pull it off, slide another one.
How much are the filters?
Filters can range anywhere from about, the older type, they were about 73 to 80. Newer type, you're looking at about 108.
But they last for years, and if you keep them clean and don't let them, well, you just want to keep them, you'll have this type, it's the only one you'll see. But you need to keep them grooves clean so it can breathe. It's just got to breathe. Let's see, what else can I think about on the vacuum system? Notice we use a sealant around on the top of the tank. It's called a forma gasket, and we put it on with a dispenser that makes it real nice and pretty. And the way they do this, they put this stuff on, you know, when it's wet, they make sure the top is good and clean. They put this stuff on there, and they'll take the lid and they'll put a little oil or something around the top of the lid, and then they'll spray this with water. So you got oil up here and water down here. And they'll set the lid on here and just let it sit for about 24 hours, overnight or whatever, a good long period of time. And what it does, the weight of the lid puts a nice flat surface on this, so you got a good seal. If you start getting gaps in here, instead of the air that should have been pulled from the carpet, it's pulled through these gaps, and that's not going to do much for your cleaning process. So you definitely want to. Now the other thing you need to do is, you know, when you dump your tank, somebody says, "Well, Henry, I still have 3 inches of on the bottom of the tank, it won't drain out." Not really. It looks that way. The bottom of the tank is exactly adjacent to the bottom of that tube there. The bottom of the tank is, you can actually see the little groove across there. So you can rinse it out, and you should wash it out and keep it cleaned out. A lot of people will park their vehicle in such a way that this is the low corner. And they'll get in with the hose that they normally hook to the front of the machine. They'll bring the hose up here, and they'll wash it out and clean it out. Today, when you smell of this tank, really enjoy it, because from this day forward, it'll never smell that way again. It will curl your hair, even at the best you can do. Another place that you could run into a problem is if you loosen your vacuum, you could catch a toothpick. You could catch a toothpick down in here someplace, and begin to catch lint and fuzz and stuff, and you could get plugged up right down it. So a light down it, shine a light down in there, and you can see whether it's clear or not. So anyway, make sure your tool doesn't collect a little piece of wire, toothpick, or something crosswise, collecting lint, plugged up. Now No airflow again. Okay. Can you think of questions about the vacuum system that you might want to ask? It's pretty simple. It really is. It's pretty simple, but very, very important because, like I say, if you don't have a good vacuum system, you don't have a very good cleaning system either. The things we're going to do next is talk about maintenance and service more than anything else, about how to change a belt, how to pull a flange off. We'll do some of that, and the other thing we're going to do, kind of, I don't know, how far we want to go here before?
As long as you feel that we need, they've already got the machine installed, so we can run up
But
at
I was
any
thinking
point.
about, though, taking a break for
lunch.
lunch or whatever.
We could do that at any moment now. I mean, it's at noon, so if you'd like to do that now, or if you'd like to finish up, either way works for us.
Let's take whatever, not a real long, let's take a little lunch period. Is water flowing? Is the water flow switch working? Do I have temperature and water flow? Then you get the red light, green and red light. Anytime the red light is on, if you put your hand down here, you should burn the hair right off your arms. It should be burning. Okay, so heater switch, voltage, of course we got to have voltage. And if you don't get voltage, you know the heater's not going to work because that's our circuit that we dealt with. Then we come over to here. This either has to do with vacuum or pressure. This is hundreds of pounds of pressure, and like I say, normally for carpet cleaning around 450. And again, if you don't like
It's already preset on the medium.
right, if you don't like what's set in here, with the machine running, readjust. It's pointing at medium. Readjust your regulator to that value that just seems to be exactly right for you. Okay, and then, you know, you got 200 maybe for low, maybe 1400 for high or whatever. Again, those are adjustable for whatever you like. We spent on a pretty good value that most people stick with, but you don't have to. That's the whole idea about it. It's your machine. You can crank in there anything that suits you the most. And then I come down to the bottom. Somebody said, well, how in the world do you keep your battery recharged? Now, a lot of people think this alternator over here has to do with battery. It's not. That alternator or generator has nothing at all to do with recharging your battery. That's only for a heater circuit. It's only 110 volts. Your battery is recharged from a voltage regulator that's right, I'm touching with my hand under here, that allows the battery to be recharged while you're running the machine. And the way you can tell that, if it's up around 14 volts, that's normal. This tells you that your battery is being recharged if it's up in and around 14 volts. If it's down to 11 or 12, you can expect pretty soon, battery's going low. So just like on your car, if you're not charging, it's going to go down, and it's done very similar to the way a car is, except the components look different. This has a rectifier regulator that's screwed right into the side of the engine with 3 wires attached to it. When I look at this meter right now, this tells me how many hours there is on the machine, how many hours it's been ran. When the machine is running, it will tell me the RPM of the engine. So that's how you come up with your 2,900 RPM. And it's always go just a little bit above it, because when you start throwing switches on, they're going to fall down because you're putting a load on the engine. So use a little Kentucky windage, you go a little bit above, expecting to fall back to that point. Okay, just like a car, nothing exactly the same. Now there's a button on here that says press when starting. And a lot of people, is that a starter? No. What this is, we know right now there's no oil pressure in that engine. We know good and well there's no oil pressure.
It's like a primer?
No, it's a bypass switch. Let's say that to get it started real fast, I push on the button, and as soon as the engine starts, almost immediately you let go of the button. Because now the oil sentry switch, which is down underneath this, right underneath here, the oil sentry switch says, yes, I have sufficient oil pressure. I'm in good shape. I'm really fine. And it doesn't ground out the engine now. But if I lose my oil pressure, the oil sentry switch will ground out your ignition system and saying, hey, I'm not going to let this thing run if I lose my oil pressure. So I could live without this, and it'll start if you don't push it, but you have to crank the engine over until the starter builds up enough oil pressure for it to start, which could be 3 or 4 extra turns, and if your battery was low, you might have a dead battery before you got there. But when I push on this, and usually if I choke it a little, well, listen, I'm gonna have to work. We're gonna have to work on this a little bit. Somebody. Okay, that's something I got to show the guys. This hasn't been ran yet. Choke is not working. But usually, first time you start it in the morning, choke it, and almost immediately you can let go of the button, push the choke back in, and you're going. You will be able to start your engine and run it better than anybody else in town because you know how much choke, you know about how much throttle. And by the way, talking about the throttle, yes, you can push the throttle in and out, but you'll never catch it. You're speeding up, you're slowing down. I like to crank it in like, or out, well actually crank it out like this and bring it up and to that 2,900 RPM or thereabout. And once I get it out there and set where I want it to be, I'm going to turn this fully clockwise. That puts a brake on. See, right now, this turns real easy. And right now, it's restrained on it. So this will hold your throttle pretty much put to whatever you set it for. But don't try to pull it in and out with the brake on. You'll wear the brake out on it. You know, it's like running your car with your foot on the brake. You'll wear the pads out. Well, you'll wear the pads out in that by forcing it. Okay, now, we pretty well went around the front panel. Is there anything at all on the front panel? Got a circuit breaker, of course, and this kill switch. This confuses a lot of people. The kill switch does. A lot of people think, oh, I press when starting. Well, it does make it start quicker to press it in because you've already ungrounded the engine so it can start running. Even though now some people have run into a situation like this. They lost their oil filter. It came loose. They drained all their oil out. Engine quit. He didn't realize this. He didn't have any oil. He comes out and he says, let's find it. Away he goes. Goes dead. About 3 times, and he says, oh, I know what I'll do. You know what he's done already. Tape. Next day after tomorrow, when he comes in for his new engine, he said, I didn't know what that thing was for. You should have, because it would have saved you an engine. You might have had a problem, but it'd been a little problem compared to a big problem. You might have had an oil pump or something in the engine that was bad that caused it. But hey, oil pumps are cheaper than engines. Or low. One guy drove a nail through his filter. He put shelves in his van. Had a 2x4 there and drove it in. Drove a nail right through his filter. Yeah, he lost his oil pressure pretty soon. He had oil all over the van, but this guy, after he came down, he showed him what he did. He thought it was funny too. He even laughed about it. He drove a nail through his oil filter. Down on the lower panel, I think we pretty well covered about everything. Now I know a couple of you weren't here when we was talking about the oiler. This is, you remember earlier I said we can wash out the blower with fresh water and shoot WD-40 in it. We don't have to crawl up here and push a breaker in. We can do it right down here. We open this valve, bring your garden hose down here, shoot a little water, wash it out, let it air dry, shoot some WD-40, shut it, close, and I didn't have to crawl in the van to do it all. We put it right out on the front of the machine.
Was the machine all the way down?
Yeah, it's running, yeah. So the suction will suck the oil in and suck the water in. It goes into the blower right here. See this hose? Right. So when I shoot stuff in there, with the blower running, it's going to suck it right down into the and wash out the grit and the grime and anything that might be in the blower.
Is the one, the vans on the 02 and 07, R02 and 07, like?
No.
It does have that?